Good afternoon. Welcome to Bothwell Castle. Bothwell Castle is associated with lots of Scottish heroes, including Robert the Bruce, William Wallace, the Black Douglas, also associated with Andrew Murray, or Murray. Now, the castle itself was built back in 1242 by William de Murray, father of Andrew de Murray. And what happened in the year 1296? Scotland was invaded by Edward I with a huge army. They went up to Dunbar and they slaughtered the Scots at Dunbar. Now, the Murrays, Andrew de Murray, his picture's up there, and his father, William Murray, along with his uncle, fought in that battle. This castle here was a Murray stronghold before Scotland was invaded in 1296. During the battle, Murray and his father and his uncle were captured by the English. Now, Andrew de Murray, the son, was taken to Chester Castle, but his father and his uncle were taken to the Tower of London. There they perished. They were probably tortured and starved to death. However, Andrew Murray was a lucky one at that time because he was in Chester Castle and he managed to escape. He made his way back to Scotland and started a resistance movement against English occupation. While Andrew Murray was gathering armies in the north to fight against English occupation, in the south of the country, William Wallace was also doing the same thing, resisting English occupation. And what eventually happened with these great leaders, William Wallace, who's pictured in the far side there, and Andrew Murray, they met up at Stirling Brig. And Stirling Brig was one of the most famous victories that Scotland ever had over England. At the Battle of Stirling Brig, the bridge was narrow, and as the English soldiers came across, Murray and Wallace made the move. They attacked. The English cavalry were in confusion. Some of them tried to turn back in the narrow bridge, and many of the cavalry fell into the river. The Scots had a decisive victory at the Battle of Stirling Brig in the year 1298. Now, after that battle, something very significant happened. The Scots sent a letter to Lubeck in Germany to let them know that Scotland was again free and the ports of Scotland were open again for business. Way back in the year 1298, we were trading with countries all over the world. Don't ever believe the scare tactics that we're unable to trade and look after ourselves. We've been doing it way back from the 12th and 13th century. And that famous document has the names of William Wallace, son of Alan Wallace of Ayr, and Andrew Murray, son of William de Murray, who actually built this magnificent castle here. Now, later on, what happened during the Wars of Independence, when Murray and Wallace had the victory at Stirling, the battle continued and Edward I brought up an even bigger army at Falkirk, one of the biggest armies he ever brought up. And unfortunately, a lot of Scots didn't turn up at that battle. It was an open field, and people like Robert the Bruce decided it was not a good idea and that he would live to fight another day. Many great Scottish knights fell that day at Falkirk. And after that, William Wallace was on the run. He was eventually captured on the 5th of August, 1305 at Rob Royston. He was taken to Westminster Hall in London. And on the 23rd of August, 1305, William Wallace was taken from Westminster Hall. He was put on a hurdle and paraded through the streets of London for 6 miles up to Smithfield, where he was brutally hung, drawn, and quartered. But we will never forget these great heroes like William Wallace and Andrew de Murray, who gave their lives for Scotland. I'm now going to ask up the next speaker, and that will be Glenn Sinclair.
It's absolutely beautiful, and I think that's one of the things that people in Scotland will tell you all the time. They don't even know their own country. I certainly don't know it. I've never been really over here very often, having spent more time being in the Highlands, but I also hadn't really heard too much at all about any of the heroes that James was talking about there until recently, when I started myself to research. And I thoroughly recommend everybody does that, because you can completely and utterly blown away by the enormous feats that these people did in order to contain Scotland as an independent country at the time, and the things they did were absolutely incredible. I was going to speak a wee bit about James Douglas. First of all, his dad, he was called William Douglas, also called Harry, which also means bold. He was the first noble supporter for William Wallace, and he died in 1298 as a prisoner in the Tower of London. His mum was Elizabeth Stuart, daughter of Sir Alexander Stuart, 4th High Steward of Scotland, and he died in 1297 or 1298 as well. Douglas was sent to France for his own safety, because this was during the Wars of Independence, which had begun, and he was educated in Paris. And when he was there, he met with a guy called Bishop William Lamberton of St Andrews, and he's often mentioned in much of the history that happens around this time. And he decided to take him as a squire, and he returned to Scotland with him. But when he got there, he found all his lands had been seized, and he was virtually a landless outcast in an occupied feudal society. And he decided to set about making sure he could find a way to bring back his lands. He's mentioned in a poem by John Barber called The Bruce, which is very famous. And it's a speech that he was supposed to have given to Lamberton, the Bishop of St Andrews. And this is how it goes. Sir, you see how the English tyrant forcibly has disposed me of my land, and you are made to understand that the Earl of Carrick claims to be the rightful king of this country. The English, since he slew that man, are keen to catch him if they can, and they would seize his lands as well, and yet with him I faith would dwell. Now therefore, if it be your will, with him will I take good or ill, through him I hope my land to win, despite the Clifford and his kin. It was someone called Clifford that was given his lands. This refers to Bruce's slaying of John Comyn, his leading rival, on the 6th of February at 1306 at Greyfriars in Dumfries, when Bruce immediately claimed the crown of Scotland 7 weeks later, in defiance of the English king. And this was him on his way to Glasgow. James Douglas actually met Robert the Bruce and explained his situation to him. Apparently he was on a horse that was borrowed from the Bishop Lamberton, and the site of their meeting is thought to be the summit of a hill in Dumfries and Galloway, known as the Crown of Scotland. Douglas explained who he was and his circumstances to the Bruce, and thus began their friendship, true that no mischance could e'er undo, nor lessen while they were alive, their friendship more and more could thrive. I didn't make that bit up, that was from the Bruce's, of John Barber as well. Now, he was now set on to his share of successes and misfortunes with the Bruce. Dedicated to him, he spent the rest of his life championing the cause for freedom for Scotland alongside the Bruce. and many other people, including William Sinclair of Roslyn. Now,
Well,
what
William
happened
Sinclair's
was
just
William
fell
Sinclair
down.
just fell down. That's really strange.
That's strange, isn't it?
Yes. It's probably related to me anyway, so he's got quite like, he's heard enough of what I've got to say. But William Sinclair was actually based at Roslyn. Now, his father had been involved in the very first big battle he had to have in 1305, which was basically the English came and decided to occupy the lands around Roslyn. But unfortunately, they didn't reckon on the fact that they were going to come and chase them off, which they did. So Bruce decided to take over the parts of Scotland that were a bit further north and to try to get their freedom back again. But James Douglas decided he would settle around the lands near his lands and try and get them back. But also he was hiding out in Selkirk Forest. Now my thought is that Selkirk Forest isn't really all that far from the lands of Roslyn, so they probably became friends, William Sinclair and him. And again, they were lifelong friends who fought together for independence, and eventually they actually died together on the same day. So I would just like to say today that it's an incredible feat that these guys achieved for Scotland, and I think they should never ever be forgotten. And the more you read about them, the more unbelievable it is. And thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Now, the next speaker is going to be Andy Taggart, who's going to tell us about the Black Douglas, I believe.
Go on, just hold it. Right, but we're here today on a commemoration of the man called James Douglas, or James the Good. Some people know him as the Black Douglas. I think that name derived from the English, because some of the things that James Douglas done, he repeated things that the English had tortured and slain Scottish people. So the English, they thought, well, this guy's not right. He can't have a soul. He's got no heart. And they feared him. So then there's two stories to why the name Black Douglas came about. And as Gwen said, his father, William Douglas, was one of the first nobles to come out in support of William Wallace. And Longshanks put both his parents in the Tower of London, where they died there. As a child, James Douglas was sent to France. When he returned to Scotland, as Gwen has already mentioned, he returned as a young man, and when Robert the Bruce was on his way to be crowned at Scone, their paths crossed. After the coronation, and Robert the Bruce was crowned king, James Douglas introduced himself and immediately swore his allegiance to the new king. And a lot of people will ask, was this meeting fate or coincidence? For whatever reason it happened, it was to prove a great strategical and immovable friendship that would last until both their deaths. James Douglas quickly rose through the ranks and was one of Bruce's most trusted and feared leaders. He was so highly thought of, he was made a knight banneret, meaning he could fly his own colours or coat of arms while fighting at his king's side. When Robert the Bruce had to go to Ireland to help his brother Edward Bruce, who had taken an army of around 6,000, this left James Douglas in charge of Scotland. And his border activities and victories at Strathmuir and Lintalee brought him more prominence as a fearless warrior and also gained him more political stature. His fatherland and properties had now been returned to the Douglas clan. There were still battles to be fought, and one in particular which swayed the pendulum in Scotland's favour. Although it might not have been the biggest in comparison to other battles, the Battle of Stanhope Park, which ended in total embarrassment for the English. Douglas and his army attacked the English at night, and basically the English army ran away. They deserted. And Edward II, he was pushed to the edge, right? His bottle went, his mind went. His wife and her lover, Lord Roger Mortimer, deposed him as king. They took over. His son, Edward III, he was king, but he was not old enough to run the affairs of England. But because of this bad defeat, it led to the Treaty of Northampton, which then followed on that Robert the Bruce was officially recognised as the King of Scotland, and Scotland was independent. Now, on his deathbed, Robert Bruce asked one last favour of James Douglas, and that was, would he take his heart to the Holy Land, to Jerusalem, because he did not fulfil his vow as a king to fight in a holy crusade. On the way to the Holy Land, James Douglas, 6 other knights, squires and a few other gentlemen, they sailed from Berwick. When they landed in Spain, they agreed to help King Alfonso fight against the Saracens, the Moors, whatever you want to call them. This led to a battle where all the Scots, except one, were killed. This battle was known as the Battle of Tiba. And the only knight, Scottish knight to survive that was William Keith of Galston, who brought back the body of James Douglas and the heart of Robert the Bruce. James Douglas's body is now in St Bride's Kirk down in Douglas, and the heart of William Wallace is still interned under the high altar at the Abbey of Melrose. So basically, that's the story of Sir James Douglas, or James the Good. That's all right.
It's associated with all these great heroes of Scotland. William Wallace, for instance, pictured on the far side there. During the Wars of Independence, in the year 1298, after the Battle of Stirling Brig, they attacked this castle that was held by the English, and it took them 13 months to retake this castle. You can imagine when you walk around what a difficult thing it was, because the English occupiers had plenty of supplies in there, and it was only when the supplies ran out after a year and they were starving that they had to give the castle up, and the Scots retook the castle. Now, other people that I mentioned that are associated with this castle, obviously Andrew de Murray. He was killed, unfortunately, at the Battle of Stirling Brig when he was joint leader of the Scottish Army. And later on, before the Battle of Bannockburn, this castle was occupied by an English force, and the brother of Robert the Bruce, Edward Bruce, with a division of Scots, retook this castle in 1314. Now after that, Scotland Scotland had regained independence. Whether it was recognised by England, it didn't matter. We won the battle. We were an independent country, as we had been for well over 500 years previous. Now, what actually happened in the year 1328 at Cardross in Scotland? Robert the Bruce lay dying. He called for his great friend, the Black Douglas, called him to his bedside. And he said he was sorry for all the bloodshed that had happened during the Wars of Independence. All these people that died for Scotland.